Hi guys, my name is Mrs. Han, and we're going to be learning about run-on sentences and fragments today. As we go through this lesson, you should be filling out these run-on sentence and fragment notes. So you can pause the video at any time to fill in the blank or do some of the practice sentences that I have built into these notes so you can see how much you're understanding these concepts. All right, so let's talk about our learning goal. Today, I will be able to identify your run on sentence and use one of the four run on sentence strategies to fix it. So, one of the biggest problems with grammar in seventh grade is that students have a lot of run on sentences and fragments, meaning either incomplete sentences or sentences that are stuck together without the right punctuation. And that makes it really confusing because the punctuation tells us where to pause, where one idea ends, and the next idea begins. So let's talk about a run on sentence. A run on sentence is a sentence that contains two improperly joined independent clauses. I'll define that for you in a minute. This means that there are two sentences that are stuck together without the right punctuation. So let's look at this example. She is nice. I hope we can hang out more. Think about where the first idea ends and the second idea begins. If I corrected this sentence, it would look like this. She is nice. New idea. I hope we can hang out more. That tells me as a reader where to pause. Okay, a fragment, on the other hand, is an incomplete sentence. It's missing one of the things a sentence needs. So, for example, the really angry dog. The really angry dog, what? What did the really angry dog do? That's an incomplete sentence. So let's break it down. Before you learn to identify and fix run on sentences and fragments, you first need to learn about clauses. So I use this term an independent clause. That's another word for a sentence that can stand alone. Just like an independent person, they can pay their bills, they own their own car, they can live alone. An independent clause is basically a sentence that has all the things it needs to stand all alone by itself. So here's the three things in our independent clause formula. To be an independent clause, it must have a subject, a verb, and a complete idea. For example, she is a really nice person. She is the subject, is the verb. A really nice person, I've completed that thought. She is a really nice person. That's a complete thought. Or it always rains a lot in August. It is the subject. Rains is that action verb there, the action that's happening. And a lot in August, I have a complete thought there. Okay, now a dependent clause is another term we're going to learn. An independent clause can stand all by itself. It's basically another word for a sentence. A dependent clause is just a clause, a group of words that cannot stand alone. It's not a complete sentence, it's a type of fragment. Dependent clauses begin with what we call subordinating conjunctions. Conjunctions are words that connect. So they begin with a subordinating conjunction, but they're missing one of the three main parts of the independent clause, the subject, the verb, or the complete idea. They're missing one of those three parts. Here are some examples of subordinating conjunction words. Although, even though, because, unless, whenever. Like if I said, because it's Saturday, well, that's a dependent clause. I started with the word because, and I don't have a complete thought. Because it's Saturday, what? Because it's Saturday, I'm going to drink a Dr. Pepper. All right, so what I want you to do is pause the video. On your notes, you've got 6 practice sentences, and I want you to label each of them as either an independent clause, meaning they have a subject, a verb, a complete idea, right? A subject is who or what's the sentence about. A verb is either a linking verb, like is or was, and then an action verb, like the action. And number 3, a complete idea. Is that a complete thought, or is it missing part of that idea? Then, after you pause the video, go ahead and press play, and I'll reveal the answers. Pause the video now. Okay, hopefully you paused the video and did the answers on your notes. So now let's check and see if your answers are correct. So here are your answers. Whenever she eats junk food, you should have labeled that as a dependent clause. Whenever she eats junk food, what? Now, if I got rid of that word whenever and just deleted it, I could say she eats junk food. That actually would be a complete sentence. She is the subject, who or what the sentence is about. Eats is the verb, it's an action verb, and what does she eat? Junk food. That's the complete idea. But when I add that word whenever, it makes it a dependent clause. Whenever she eats junk food, what? Whenever she eats junk food, she gets a stomach ache. Well, that would be a complete thought. So since it has an incomplete thought and it begins with that conjunction, that subordinating conjunction, that's a dependent clause. Our second one, he ran today. That's a complete thought. He is the subject, ran is the action verb. He ran today. That's a complete thought. Number 3, John loves dogs is independent. Number 4, although John eats carrots, that does not have a complete thought. That's dependent. Number 5, despite being smart is dependent. And finally, number 6, even though it's got a lot of words, that's still dependent. Before I went to school last Friday morning, what? I don't know what happened before I went to school. So that's a dependent clause. All right. Okay, so there are four ways to correct run on sentences. So the first way is really obvious. We all learned this when we were younger. You can just use a period and capitalize the next sentence, and then you've made that two sentences. So let's look at this incorrect sentence. Miranda was the lead vocalist in her band. It was a punk rock band. So think about where the first idea ends and the second idea begins, or where do we have a new subject and a new verb? So Miranda was the lead vocalist in her band is our first idea. Our second idea is it was a punk rock band because now I have it as a subject, was as a verb, and a whole new idea. So I would fix this by putting a period after band and capitalizing the word I. Okay, that's pretty simple. Now we're going to practice using a semicolon. And a semicolon looks like this mark right here. It's got a period at the top and a comma underneath. Let's look at where we would separate these two independent clauses here. Some students think they can study for an important exam by cramming all night. They are probably wrong. Take a second, pause the video, think about where you would add a semicolon. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, hopefully you took a second. You looked at where where you would add the semicolon to correct the run-on sentence here. So here's where we would split it. Some students think they can study for an important exam by cramming all night. Stop. They are probably wrong. There's my new idea. So here's an interesting thing about semicolons. After a semicolon, you don't need to capitalize. Unlike a period, you capitalize the next word. Semicolon, the word after it can remain lowercase. So I separated it after night and before they. Let's talk a little bit more about semicolons. A semicolon is just like a period where it separates two sentences, except one thing. A semicolon separates two independent clauses that are related ideas. Let's look at the green sentence. That's the right sentence. The ice cream truck man drove by my house. He had big hairy knuckles. Gross. Now, I can use a semicolon there because the guy that had big hairy knuckles is the ice cream truck man that I talked about in the first sentence. So I can connect those two because I'm talking about the same idea. So think of like a period as a really long full stop, and think of semicolon as like a brief stop before I move on to the next idea that I'm still talking about. Now, here would be a wrong way to use it. The ice cream truck man drove by my house. I'm going to take my dog for a walk. The first sentence and the second sentence, they have nothing to do together. So I should really use a period there instead of a semicolon because a period's a full stop. Now I'm moving on to a brand new idea, whereas a semicolon is a brief stop. I'm still talking about the same idea. Okay, so number one, use a period. Number two, use a semicolon. Number three, you can separate two run-on sentences by using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Here's how we remember coordinating conjunctions. Fanboys, see these fanboys at the bottom? Fanboy stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. There are 7 fanboys, for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Those are the only coordinating conjunctions we have. Now, here's the biggest issue I ever see with 7th grade students. They think they can separate two sentences with just a comma. No matter what you remember from this lesson today, remember you cannot separate two sentences with just a comma. You can use a comma plus a coordinating conjunction. You can't have one or the other. You must put them together, a comma and a coordinating conjunction, comma and, comma nor, comma but, comma yet. But you can't have just a comma and you can't have just the word and. You've got to use both, okay? Let's fix this incorrect sentence. First, I went to the grocery store, then I went to the library. Think about where I would use a comma to separate, plus the for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And then think about which of those makes sense. All right, let's look at how I fixed this sentence here. Okay, oh, I didn't do it on the next slide, so we're just going to do it right here. First, I went to the grocery store, comma, and then I went to the library. Okay, that would make sense. You could even use so. First, I went to the grocery store, comma, so then I went to the library. But either way, you're going to separate that sentence in between store and then, and you're going to use the comma plus a fanboys. That makes sense there. Okay, so number one, use a period. Number two, you can use a semicolon. Number three, you can use a comma plus a coordinating conjunction, fanboys, for and, or, but, or, yet. So here's the fourth and final way that you can separate sentences when they're run-ons. Okay, you can use what's called a subordinating conjunction or a dependent word. We heard that word a minute ago when we were talking about dependent clauses. So you could use a word like after, although, before, unless, as, because, even though, if, since, until, when, and while. Remember, you can pause the video at any time if you're still filling in the blanks. Let's look at this sentence. Maria and John like skiing, Karen does not. All right, here's where it's a run-on in between skiing and Karen. Think about where you could put these words. You could put them at the beginning, in the middle, in different places in the middle. Think about how we could correct the sentence. Pause the video, try correcting the sentence. Then I'll give you a couple answers. Okay, hopefully you paused the video. So let's look at this sentence again. There's a few ways that we can correct the sentence. Okay, first I could say, although Maria and John like skiing, Karen does not. I could also put something in the middle here. Now, if I put although at the beginning, although Maria and John like skiing, I would need a comma here because there's a pause. Although Maria and John like skiing, comma, Karen does not. I could even say, even though Maria and John like skiing, comma, oops, I spelled that wrong there. Karen does not. But think about where I could stick it in the middle. I could also put it here. Maria and John like skiing, even though Karen does not. I could put it in the middle. Although would work in the middle there too. There's one more that would work. I think the word while. I could say while Maria and John like skiing, comma, Karen does not. Or I could take while and I could put it in the middle. Maria and John like skiing, while Karen does not. So see, I can take those words and put them in different places, but since those are connecting words, I can fix two run-on sentences by using a subordinating conjunction at the beginning or in the middle of the sentence. All right. So those are the three options I showed you. Although Maria and John like skiing, comma, or Maria and John like skiing even though, or while Maria and John like skiing, comma, Karen does not. So you've got three options there. Okay, there are two types of run-on sentences. One is called a fused sentence, really just melded together. Two is called a comma splice sentence. So a fused sentence occurs when two sentences are joined without any punctuation, none at all. Look at this one right here. Every now and then we go hiking. I like to hike at Hocking Hills State Park. Think about where you'd fix that. Where does the first idea end and the next idea begin? Every now and then we go hiking, period. New sentence. I like to hike at Hocking Hills State Park. All right, now a comma splice is when you've got two sentences joined with just a comma. So remember what I told you. You cannot separate two sentences with just a comma. You can have the word and or but or for or nor, but you can't have just a comma. So let's fix this one. The teacher told the students to complete the section on comma splices. She told them to compose a 5-page essay. So, see where I've got that comma? I'm going to add the word and. The teacher told the students to complete the section on comma splices, comma, and she also told them to compose a 5-page essay. All right, here are your next steps. Now that you've taken the notes, you're going to take this run-on sentence quiz. You can click on it on this PowerPoint or on the PowerPoint that's available on the learning plan, or you can just click on it straight on the learning plan. If you get a 9 or higher on the quiz, you're going to do the activity worksheet that's run-on sentence activity B. If you get an 8 or lower, you're going to have different questions to practice, and you're going to complete run-on sentence practice activity A. Go ahead and get the sheet that you need, and good luck as you practice these skills.